Hello, welcome to the Fountain Room at the Barbican at this LREF event. So I'm Martin Evans. I'm the creative director at Landsec. You and I, we're Landsec's regeneration company. I know quite a lot of you in this room, which is quite nice. So welcome to this session, which is called Why You Should Back the Bakerloo, and it's we're here today invited by and in association with the London boroughs of Lewisham and Southwark. We're gathering here in this room today with this august panel to discuss a subject that's very much in the news. I'm going to say at the moment, but I mean at the moment, like right now, I just checked my phone to see whether there's been any announcement about HS2, not yet, about transport infrastructure and its role in the successful economic life of our communities. So the issue of whether the government's going to continue its commitment fully to HS2 and maintain the proposal to connect in the north to Manchester and the south direct to Euston is something that we'll likely hear about today and this evening and tomorrow and the days after. And who knows what that is that we're going to hear. Though I think noise is coming from Downing Street, and I think they call it rolling the pitch, are not good, I don't think. But what we do know is that the announcement, when it comes, will just be the start of this stage of debate, because transport infrastructure is one of the most important drivers of economic growth available to us. How would our cities even begin to work if people couldn't travel easily from one place to another? Without efficient, affordable, reliable transport systems, literally, our cities would grind to a halt. London is a city that's particularly alive with debate about its transport infrastructure. Who controls it? Who pays for it? I went to a really fantastic event recently where the chief planner from the GLA and the chief planner from New York hosted a dinner in London and talked about the things they have in common and the things that they have differently. It was a fascinating dinner, fascinating talk, and one of the things that they had the greatest debate about was the fact that the Mayor of London, through TfL, controls London's public transport system, or in principle, and in New York, the Mayor doesn't. And that was the subject that created the most of the debate about what that meant, what the planner from New York said, the freedom that gave the Mayor of London to decide great big important things about how to make London work better is simply not available to the Mayor of New York. So who controls it? Who pays for it? Where should that investment be prioritised? Should the transport be cheaper? Should it be more expensive? Should we increase cycle lanes at the expense of bus lanes? Should we increase the quality and frequency of train services into and out of London's satellite towns so that people can travel easily from places outside the capital where it's probably more affordable to live? Or should we be building more homes within London that are affordable so we don't have to do that? Putting more pressure on London's city transport system? Should we have more buses, trams? Should we put aircon in the tube? I mean, honestly, if you were running TfL, which we've got a senior member of here, I think it's a huge headache and a huge opportunity, because the answer is probably something to do with all of the above things. But then we have to ask, of course, who's going to pay for it at a time when public investment is under incredible pressure. What's clear from the amount of time that we in London spend talking about these issues, though, is that building and operating a fantastic public transport system underpins our social and economic future, and I think that's absolutely crystal clear. And we're here today to discuss one of the most important proposals that's on the table for an increase in the scale and quality of our own public transport system here in London, the upgrade and extension to the Bakerloo line. So in preparation for this, I found out more about the Bakerloo line than I ever imagined that there was to know. It's currently 23 kilometres long and was fully completed in 1915. It's the brown line on our tube map, and it runs between Harrow and Wealdstone in the northwest of our city, diagonally right across London to Elephant and Castle in the south. It's got 25 stations, 15 of which are underground. It's apparently the 9th busiest line on the underground network, and it carries 100 million people a year. Like most underground lines, it's grown over its life. When it opened in 1906, it ran between what's now Lambeth North Station and Baker Street, and so that's what gave it its name. It's a contraction of the Baker Street and Waterloo Railway. It had a slightly inauspicious start in that its original financier got himself into trouble and was taken to court and convicted of fraud and killed himself in the courts of justice when he was convicted. Its current all-day route was permanently established only in the 1980s in its completeness, coming and going a bit and using different lines after the development of the Jubilee line. So we're here to talk about extending the Bakerloo line primarily to the south, which is not a new proposal. An extension from the Elephant to Camberwell Denmark Hill was proposed as early as the 1930s. At a time, the budget was an enormous £5 million. Imagine if we could do it for that now. I don't think we'd be talking here, would we? We'd just be getting on with it. That project was postponed due to rising costs. I think we've heard that before too. Nothing really changes, does it? An extension to Camberwell even made it onto a version of the tube map in 1949, but again, nothing was done, and so it didn't become real. So maybe, as we're about to discuss today, it's about time that this great project that's been talked about for a very long time has its time to come. So the current campaign to Back the Bakerloo proposes an extension south through Southwark and Lewisham. The Mayor of London's committed to the project, which will see the line extended from the Elephant south to Lewisham through Old Kent Road and New Cross Gate. There are further proposals for a second stage that will then take the line further south into Ladywell, Catford, Lower Sydenham and finally down to Hayes. 8 new stations, a new upgrade to the trains, and halving the journey time from Lewisham to Oxford Circus, for instance. Knock-on impact of 142,000 jobs and 91,000 new homes, opportunity to build around the infrastructure that we'd be building with the new project. And so as with all these infrastructure projects, though, it's not just the local area around the station developments that benefit. And that's why we have a panel here today representing communities right across London and along the Bakerloo line. I'm going to introduce you to our august panel now, and then we're going to have a conversation between us. Then I'm going to open the floor up to questions, and the Slido app is the way to do that. Up here, you just go to Slido on your web and use the LREF23 as the sign-in and just ask a question. And I've got a lovely little mini iPad here, and I'll be able to see. And then I'll call you out, and you can stand up and ask a question and introduce yourself to the panel. And then we will have 15 or 20 minutes before we have to quit the room to just have a chat and a conversation between us, and we can just mill and drink some nice coffee from over there. So, to the people who really know what they're talking about, we have a properly distinguished panel here today, which I think illustrates the strength of feeling for this project, which you can help, by the way, by visiting backthebakerloo.org.uk and signing up to show your support, and I'd urge you, really please do that. So first up to my left here is Councillor Kieran Williams. Kieran is leader of the London Borough of Southwark. He leads Southwark as Labour councillor for Camberwell Green Ward. He's been a councillor in the borough since 2014 and a member of its cabinet since 2018 and leader since 2020 when he took over from Peter John. Kieran comes to his leadership role in the borough from a career in local government, Sheffield City Council, and then Lambeth, where he was head of health and well-being. In his formal declaration of interests as a public servant, Kieran's most significant contribution to that form is that he proudly lists that he's a homeowner in the London Borough of Southwark, probably, I think, the most important interest that he has as a leader of that great borough. In March this year, Jennifer Douthwaite took up the role of Acting Chief Exec at Lewisham Council, where she's worked since 2021, stepping up from Exec Director for Housing, Regen and Public Realm. Jennifer's got quite a stellar CV, from an early role as Housing Policy Officer at GLA through the Regeneration Team at Southwark to Head of Strategy and Sustainability at the Olympic Park Development, and most recently as Director of Housing Delivery in the North in Waltham Forest. Jennifer was originally a geologist, is that right?
It's a passion and a part-time project.
Excellent. So maybe there'll be an opportunity for you to get down a tunnel with a stone hammer. Maybe you can go down a tunnel with a hammer and...
I know more about boreholes than I should.
Which reminds me, I got to go down into to Crossrail Tunnel before it was finished, and I got to watch the machine do the boring. And where the material that they're putting on the floor and the material on the walls met, there was a seam. And behind this enormous cutting machine, there was a little guy with a trowel and a bucket of mortar going along the seam and connecting the floor to the wall. It was wonderful. Matthew Yates is an urban planner and joins us from TfL, where he's currently Head of Projects, Consents and Urban Design. Matthew spent almost his entire career in the transport sector, is that fair to say? Leading some of the most transformative projects in our city, including the Northern Line embarking overground extensions, Silvertown Tunnel and the UK's first urban cable car. He led the business case for Crossrail 2 and is an advisor to the Mayor, so I think increasing our knowledge here on the panel. And then last but not least at the end there, Emma Talbot works at the very other end of the Bakerloo line, although she told me just as we were sitting down there before that she lives at the other end in Hayes, lives in Hayes, works in Harrow. So I'm just wondering whether your support for this project has got anything to do with making your commute easier.
Purely
Emma.
about my commute. That's why I thought I was here.
So Emma is Director of Regen and Development at the London Borough of Harrow. It's a very new role for her, which she only took up a month or so ago, following more than 18 years at Lewisham Council, 7 of which as their head of planning. So to say that Emma's all over the Bakerloo line feels like a little bit of an understatement. So I'm going to start the session with a question to each of you that's more of a prompt for you to give us a view from your own perspective on where you're sitting and why we should be backing the Bakerloo. So Kieran, let's start with you. The Mayor of London's shown great determination in making London a world leader when it comes to tackling climate change, congestion and improving air quality. How do you think the Bakerloo line upgrade and extension can support these goals that he champions so well?
Thank you, and welcome to all of you for coming here today. Before I come back to the Bakerloo line, I want to say I hope all of you have had the chance to read the London Infrastructure Framework, a piece of work that set out a vision for investable projects across our whole city, and everything from green infrastructure, energy generation, flood defence, new homes, businesses, everything that our city needs, from the big projects down to the really local ones. And I really encourage you to read it. The reason I mention that now is because the Bakerloo line is squarely in the centre of that proposal as one of the key projects for our city. It's a project that's not just about the extension, it's about upgrading the whole line to make it the best of the infrastructure we already had. Taking trains at higher frequency and delivering more homes, jobs and growth across the length of the line and for our whole city. It's a project that's already underway. The new station at Elephant Castle is already being constructed right now, today. It's a project that's lined up, it's safeguarded along its whole route. And it's a project where the detailed work on tunnel design is happening right now, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit more of that from TfL in a moment. So why is it the right thing to do? Well, it's the right thing to do on every level for our city. It's a project that will deliver homes. Across the route, 91,000 new homes unlocked by its delivery. It's a project that will deliver new jobs, 141,000 of them across the length of the line through the whole upgrade. It'll take congestion off our roads, particularly on the Old Kent Road as you come in up from Dover. And it'll provide, in doing so, cleaner air and a healthier city. It's exactly the sort of thing that we need to be doing, not just as London, but as Britain. And isn't it deeply disappointing today to be in a position where we're talking about ending one of the national infrastructure projects that we clearly need? When you step back from all of this, what are Britain's challenges that we face right now? We face a huge productivity challenge where we're failing to keep up with the rest of the world. And we face a massive challenge making our country greener and hitting net zero. And we face a fundamental challenge of unlocking the inequalities that exist within our country. There are lots of solutions to all of those things, but we won't tackle them if we don't unlock more homes, the biggest driver of inequality in London. We won't tackle them if we don't get our productivity up by allowing people to get from where they are to where they need to be efficiently and on time. And we won't tackle them if we don't deliver big projects that allow us to have the sustainable infrastructure, low carbon, healthy infrastructure that the tube is. And for the Bakerloo line specifically, let's be clear, this is about making the most out of assets we have. We have the tunnels under central London. We have the line that goes out to Hayes. We need to fill in a gap between Elephant and Castle and Lewisham, bringing the tube to a part of London that should have had it decades ago. Both for Southwark and Lambeth, and the services onward out to Bromley. Fundamentally important about fairness for our city. But it's a project that delivers all of those things in the round and is already underway. Now, I'm absolutely confident it's going to happen. No, the money isn't all in the bank yet, and you all know that. But the solutions are there, the case is clear, and it fundamentally is the best use of the resources we have in London.
Thanks, Kieran. Jennifer, a lot of the debate that's happening this week about whether the government's going to support HS2 or not is about confidence. You know, it's about the confidence that that decision would deliver to the investment market, to those companies who need to come to the UK to bring their investment money. How are we to manage the priorities for growth that are clear for our city without the certainty of such infrastructure delivery that this project would bring? And do we make enough of the social equity case for infrastructure investment and the wider benefits to new and growing communities?
It's a really live topic, not just in terms of the national discussion that we're having at the minute, but also I know there's some people in the room for whom a conversation about infrastructure and what that unlocks in terms of development is really a ripe one. I think what we've seen in London is we've seen that over a number of years, through the hard work of the regional tier of government and local authorities stepping up to the plate, we've tried to align infrastructure and housing delivery in a way that is really responsible and that delivers on high quality, sustainable neighbourhoods. And what we're putting at risk here, I think, in not having that infrastructure in place is an unpicking of all of the good work that's been done over decades, really, in terms of aligning the local plan, housing infrastructure delivery, investment delivery, and making sure that those things really do contribute to a two-way social compact that has to be there around development. And I think we've taken it for granted for a number of years. It's got to the point where really good developers won't want to put their reputations at risk by delivering these centrally imposed housing targets, but let's face it, the homes that we really need, in places that aren't sustainable and that aren't fit for purpose or fit for the future. So we have a bit of a chicken and egg situation here where we know that the best places to build at the density that we need, with the affordable housing that we need, won't come forward without some of that investment being secured. And I think the positives that I take from where we are with the Bakerloo line at the minute is, as you know, the speaker to my right has just said, the case is really clear. There's a sense that this is a project that will happen. It's just a question of when. And for us, it really is around, you know, working to try and accelerate the delivery of that infrastructure, because it does unlock those homes. It unlocks those sites faster. And actually, in the round, it probably saves government money too. You also in the news, not just around infrastructure, we have lots of local authorities at the moment who are really struggling with the costs of temporary accommodation, really putting, you know, our budgets at risk, our security at risk. And without the homes, we have no solution to that. So the system in the round helps in terms of the infrastructure investment. It's not just about transport, it is absolutely about housing. And in terms of the case around investment, it works for the system as a whole. It just looks a bit worse when you cut it up into the slices that are transport versus housing versus local government versus national government.
Thanks. Matthew, we've heard from the two borough perspectives at the centre of the future of this project. But for you as a highly experienced person delivering large transport infrastructure projects, I'm going to throw you a question, an easy question, perhaps doesn't have such an easy answer. Why? Why should we deliver the Bakerloo line upgrade and extension? And what's stopping us? Why is it not on site today?
I love the easy questions. Thank you, Martin. I think there is an easy answer actually to the second question, but it's quite obvious when you look at the map why the Bakerloo line is needed. It's an underground line that stops essentially in Zone 1. It's the only kind of line, apart from Walsall City, that kind of does that. And you don't really have to go too far to connect it up. And you've got existing communities along the Old Kent Road, New Cross Gate, down to Lewisham, and then also down to Hayes and Beckenham Junction, that would benefit from such a scheme. And development's actually being capped because we don't have the transport infrastructure along there. This scheme ticks so many boxes. You've got crowding issues that you can solve on other lines. There's actually spare capacity on the Bakerloo line. The usage of the Bakerloo line is less than half of the Jubilee line or the Victoria line or the Central line, and that's because the frequency isn't there and the connections aren't there. It's not kind of serving essentially all the right places. So What's stopping us from building it? I could be quite crude and just say money, but I don't think it's necessarily just that. There's a lot of planning still to do. We are continuing work on it. We haven't stopped work. We've got a couple of years' worth in our budget at TfL to take it to a single option. So we know exactly where the stations are going to be. We know exactly the right tunnel alignments. We've designed stations. We've got funding and finance. There's some funding and finance work with the boroughs at the moment. It's not a cheap scheme, but then when you put it into the context of other things that are happening across the UK, it's not totally unaffordable. Maybe right now, but it shouldn't be, certainly in the future. And it's also a scheme that would potentially give us an operating surplus over time as well, because of the amount of development that's happened along the route. What we really need to do, first of all, is to upgrade the Bakerloo line fleet. That's our real ask to government at the moment. And without that, you've got 50-year-old trains, and without that, you cannot really deliver the Bakerloo line extension. And then once you do further phases of the upgrade, you can get the signalling. So you can increase from a 22 trains per hour service up to a 24, and then potentially to 27. If we went all the way down to Hayes, you could potentially have 36 trains an hour. But in the wider context of this, and all the benefits that you get to London and also UK PLC, so you take Piccadilly line trains, they're being built in Gaul, in Yorkshire. Roundels are being built in the Isle of Wight. Metalwork is being built in Kent. So you do get that kind of UK PLC benefits. But the real issue is that we've had some real success over the last couple of years. Northern Line extension has been delivered. Barking Riverside overground extension has been delivered. Bank Station upgrade, and then not to mention what's the busiest line in the UK now, the Elizabeth line. But actually, post Silvertown Tunnel, and that might be a bit contentious for some people, but post Silvertown Tunnel, we don't have any big infrastructure projects in the pipeline. And we all know how long planning takes to go through what would be a Transport and Works Act order here. So even with the best will in the world, we couldn't open this scheme until the mid to late 2030s if we started now. So we have to continue now, because if we leave it any longer, we'll be in the 2040s, 2050s, and we all know that London's growing and we've got a housing crisis. So.
Great, thank you. Emma, as I said in my introduction to you, you've got a very particular personal experience of the Bakerloo line as it is now and as it might be if this project comes, living, working in Lewisham for so long and now right at the other end in Harrow. Why should any other part of London other than a borough with new stations proposed in it, why should it matter to the rest of London whether we all across London support this project?
And I think, Martin, what you say that across London, it is a London project, and I think that we spend a lot of time talking about the Bakerloo line extension and not enough about the enhancements that could be made across the rest of the line and the 10 opportunity areas that the Bakerloo line touches on. You know, this is a piece of infrastructure and a bits of London that haven't seen the benefits of the Elizabeth line. And, you know, this isn't just about, you know, smoothing my commute to Harrow and Wealdstone. That would be very nice. That would be very nice and handy. But it really is, and what we're hearing about today is the importance of infrastructure in making place. We talk about the housing crisis, but building homes alone isn't enough. It doesn't provide opportunity. It doesn't provide access to jobs. It doesn't provide access to just the opportunities of London. There isn't a single solution to the housing crisis. We all have a role to play in that, and delivering, you know, an appropriate level in all places. And this is an existing piece of infrastructure in London, a tube line that still has the capacity to grow. I mean, that for me and for London is a bit of a no-brainer. And, you know, I think I've, you know, perhaps I'm a little bit more relaxed than that, because I would call this project a bargain compared to the likes of Crossrail 2 and the difference it will make. And I think for us in northwest London and along the route, it's also really important that when our residents are saying, you know, well, what's in it for us with these new homes, this is in it for us. You know, the potential to go from, 20, 21 trains an hour all the way up to 36 trains an hour. I mean, that just opens up a world of opportunities for our residents and for our young people. Because when you talk about, when we're talking about the timescales here, let's hope that we've all been able to retire by the time this comes forward. We can all afford to retire. But it's for that next generation who want opportunity. And when London thrives, the rest of the country thrives. And I think that for me is why I think we do have to do a better job of having a very strong narrative of this as a London project, as the next London project, which should be fundable and is a no-brainer.
Great. I did one of these last night in Greenwich, and when it finished and we all just sort of came together and made a glass of wine in their hand, I turned to this chap and started talking to him, and I think I met the grumpiest person in the room who just said to me, "Oh, it's all blah, this." And so, in the spirit of this not being all blah, the only reason that these four very busy people have come and sat on this panel today to talk about something that's very important to them in their work is to talk to you as members of a very important community gathering here at Barbican today to see what you can do to help. So I'm going to just be really clear and say to each of you, start with you, Kieran, what do you want these people to do to help you?
Make the case with us, I think, is the first thing. Many of you will be at some of those 10 opportunity areas along the line. And it's all of us together that are going to successfully win the argument and say this is the project that should come next in the long list of projects that need to come next across the country. So seize that opportunity, and if you want to know more about it, come and talk to us and any of our teams about the detail, so you can do that. That's really important. And for us, it's then also looking at, well, what is the opportunity? In each of those areas and more along the route, please be thinking, actually, how can we get the best out of that investment when it happens for our city? What can we deliver that delivers more jobs, more homes, more growth, that would really make this investment stack up even more than I believe it does already?
Jennifer, for you and your borough, what do you want this good audience here to do?
I think it's about helping to build momentum, actually, in terms of, we all know that this is a fantastic case for all the reasons that you've heard already. It's about spreading the word and making sure that, the message is out there around just how important this infrastructure is for London. Obviously, if I was being quite parochial about Lewisham, I'd be saying that second phase is absolutely transformational for our communities in the southeast. We can't meet our climate targets without it. We won't deliver the housing that we need without it. But remember some of those key facts and figures. This is existing infrastructure. It is an upgrade. It is an absolute bargain in relation to any of the other projects that you might see in the wonderful London infrastructure plan. Go out and spread the word, and also come and work with us. Have a chat with us, as Kieran said, if you do have any questions. Talk to TfL, apply pressure on them. Talk to the government, apply pressure on them too. If you've got any fantastic ideas about ways in which we can help get that funding package in place, then of course we're very happy to hear from you.
Matt, we've heard from a political lead, from a very interested borough. We've heard from an officer lead, from a chief exec of a very interested borough. You're in another part of this narrative, which is part of the organisation that could deliver this project. What's going to help you to lead the project to deliver this thing from this community here?
We'll have a whip round afterwards and we'll get the cap out.
Are you able to say, by the way, where we are currently and what it's going to cost?
It would be upwards of 5 billion. I'll say that for now. I don't know what the limit is, but we're doing that piece of work at the moment. We're doing quite a lot of work at the moment, actually, on funding and finance, and we're looking at a lobbying strategy with the boroughs. But we've got some important things happening, haven't we? We've got mayoral elections next year, general elections next year, there's party conferences. And as was said earlier, talking the scheme up, I think we could probably help by, there's so much information that we have, but we probably want to distill it to kind of 3 to 5 bullet points. So when you're in the lift with some senior people that can make decisions, these are the 3 things or the 5 things that you can talk about in that lift. You might have to talk quite quickly with 5 things, but we need to provide the succinct argument I think. More immediately, TfL is not out of the woods financially. So passengers have come back to the network. We're probably at about 90% of pre-pandemic levels. So it's got good. It's stubbornly staying there, as you can imagine, with people kind of working from home. So we can cover our operating expenditure through our revenue this time by March within the next 6 months. What we can't do is we don't have the money for our capital expenditure. And that's where we're looking to the government to provide money for next financial year. And as part of that ask that we've got is the Bakerloo line upgrade, the rolling stock and the signals. And that's the first phase of making sure people are still talking about BLE. So if you are able to ask any questions and make people feel very awkward at any sort of party conferences, don't ask me because I already feel awkward. But somebody who's actually can make a decision about money, then please do so.
Thanks. And before I ask Emma to answer that question, can I just remind you that if you have a burning question to ask, get on the Slido. So Emma, as somebody right at the other end of the line from the proposed project, what do you think that we should be doing to improve the chances of this project coming off?
Well, I mean, firstly, completely agree that, two critical things are, building the support, talking about it and supporting it, and, the money, the case making. So where I would come from to try and say, come up quickly with something that's different, because they all, it's really hard being at the end of the day. Can I just say that? I think that what we can do as an industry, as people in the built environment who want to add value, that's what we're here today, talk about value, is that when we're talking about homes, let's talk about place along with it. Let's talk about infrastructure. Let's talk about investment and improving outcomes for people, because then that's where you build the support for projects like this. And I think that we need to help people to understand the difference that projects like this can make to real people, and really to, our young people, and giving them choice and a home. And I think that is where, for me, that's what we could all do so much better. And I think we're hearing this at the panels I've been to. It's a really consistent message that I'm hearing, and I think it is such a critical thing for the Bakerloo line as well.
How many developers are in the room? Hands? A few. So I work for a company called UNI, part of Landsec. All of our large regeneration schemes, including one my colleague Karen here runs in Lewisham, are right next to tube stations or train stations, or outside of London next to mainline railway stations. It's in our DNA to want to develop next to thriving transport infrastructure hubs. And so 8 new stations down a line where an awful lot of people live just feels to me like 8 new opportunities to go hunting for places to invest lots and lots of money. And so from our side of the table too, I think this is about get into this story, start making some noise. We're all chasing big opportunities to develop in London. There's, for whatever you think about the economy right now, there's plenty of capital out there looking for good opportunities to invest. And this feels to me, you could do worse than get on the Back the Bakerloo website and have a look at where those stations are and understand what opportunities there might be to invest. Right, we've starting to get a bit of traction on Slido, so I'm going to start with Councillor Smith from the Royal Borough of Greenwich. Aidan, where are you? Over there. Hello. Do you want to ask a question, or do you want me to?
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Shout, if you will.
So,
You're a politician. Come on, shout.
Obviously, Greenwich absolutely support this extension, and as a neighbouring borough, it will benefit us. But I wonder whether the panel would also support the Lewisham station being engineered in a way that could see a phase 3 going east towards Kidbrooke and Eltham and maybe Bexley, because we have, like some of these areas, we have areas with P-Town ratings of 0, and it's very difficult to actually unlock any housing development without tube stations. And let's face it, South East London is poorly served by the tube.
Who wants to start?
Well, it probably would come to me to start, but I have Chris in the team who's amiably sitting near the front. We've looked at a whole range of options. Chris, was that one of them?
Yeah, so we looked at a number of different options that went beyond Lewisham, and that was part of the consultation we did about 4 years ago. I think from that work, the extension to Hayes and Beckman Junction had significantly greater benefits for a range of reasons. Jennifer will set them out in depth if needed, I'm sure. That isn't to say you couldn't do more than one extension of Lewisham. The issue you get is as soon as you go in more directions, you dilute the benefits. Yeah. And I think one of the big things that, and I will come back to your point, but one of the big things around going to Hayes is you get a reallocation of the trains. So trains that currently come out of London Bridge and go to Hayes would have to go somewhere else. And actually that was a better way of spreading the benefits at a lower cost wider across South East London and into Kent than to sort of split the line, which becomes a great cost when you're doing underground junctions and also lessening the benefits where you're sending those trains.
Okay, does anybody else want to make a comment on that? No? Okay, good. Kieran, I might ask you this as the politician on our panel. Can this extension proposal be delivered under Labour within Rachel Reeves' fiscal rules if Labour is successful at the next general election?
Well, hang on, might be above my pro grade. I mean, I think what's clear is this is an investment and it'll deliver growth. And whatever political stripe the government of the day is, and it will need to be a series of governments, this is a project that's going to go through years to get to its final delivery, we will all be making the case clearly and strongly, and I think overwhelmingly with the evidence, that it will deliver that long-term growth for the economy and pay for itself over the long term, and indeed, in the long term, actually put money back into TfL's coffers to make London's transport more affordable as well. So that's the important thing to say. It's worth saying as well that we are doing two specific bits of work at the moment. So one is an updated impact study, and the other is an updated funding study. They will be coming out later this year, both of them, to really set out the case in even more fine detail than you're getting today. Thank you.
And I might throw this one at you because you made reference to it in your in what you said before. A question for Steve Jackson. Steve, where are you? There he is. Rather than can we afford to build this extension, can we afford not to? And there are a couple of other questions about how we define this. Somebody's written here bang for buck argument, and I'm all in favour of simple expressions that help us to understand what we're talking about. So could you just say a little bit about in your long experience this bang for buck question? How are we able to define that and be confident that we're in a good place?
I mean, I think the day that we start talking about the Bakerloo line extension and upgrade as a transport project is the day we've probably got it wrong, because it needs to be so much more. And you know, it is really difficult to have a very clear narrative for the difference that it does make beyond numbers. So it is a tricky one, and one that I think as a project we need to talk more about the difference it makes, and you know, deprivation, access to local economy. So I do think that's really where this comes down to it being a London project where we all need to come together and be better at explaining the difference that it makes within our individual boroughs and within our individual opportunity areas. Because, you know, I agree, you know, it's something where, you know, can we afford not to do it? The type of answer that we would give about, you know, access to opportunity and culture, does that land with the Treasury? At the moment, I don't think it does. So we will talk, and we will have to talk about it in cold hard facts, but we have to have an answer for our local communities, for our politicians at a local level as well. And I think what you do, Steve, because I can see you, so you know, if that was a difficult one, I could have really sort of given you an evil eye there, is I think we have to do better at having that clear that clear narrative about what the difference it makes to the rest of London, and recognise that that might not win an argument with the Treasury, but it's probably going to win an argument with our communities. And this is a project, and you know, Chris will have, I won't pick on you like Matt did, Chris, but you know, the public support for this as a project, you know, I'm with a professional background in planning, I'm not used to hearing about public support. So that's not always clear. But this is one where so many people are pro that because they're seeing the difference it makes. So how can we really drive down into what that means?
Matt, you wanted to add
So
something to that?
I agree with all of that. And it's not just the transport project, it's all those other things that you mentioned as well. And that's kind of winning the hearts argument. If you're winning the minds argument, and if the Treasury, they don't seem to be quite so obsessed by it now, but if they're interested in benefit-cost ratios, your bang for buck is well over 2 to 1. So every pound you invest, you get £2 back. So that's your hard facts, really.
All right. Jennifer, you must spend a large part of your day navigating between budgets and working out what you take from Peter to pay Paul. There's a question here, why should £5 billion be spent on the Bakerloo line extension to benefit one area of London at a time when HS2, which would benefit half the country, is short of funding? I mean, it's not an unreasonable question for somebody who's not schooled in this subject. What's your view as a Chief Executive of Council on that?
I think there's a danger, isn't there, that when you start looking at one area of the country versus another, that there's a very fast race to the bottom where everyone starts talking about how woeful things are in the places that they live. And I think we've heard from some of the speakers on this panel today that investment in any given area of the country benefits other parts of the country too. So I would be saying that we should be backing both. I don't think that we should be drawn into a conversation that says you can only have one thing. It should be around prioritising the things that are important, and you know, building on the points that we've heard around place. I do think there is a real point here around trust and communities and what it is that they can legitimately expect in return for putting up with some of the hassles associated with growth. I think you've seen in London that there's been a real appetite to create the affordable homes that people so desperately need. It's very rare in London that you get people who say no completely to development. It is more a conversation about, we understand the need for it, how do we make this a place that is livable and sustainable? So I'm not going to get drawn into one or the other. I think it should be both. Good
political answer. Kieran, you wanted to add something?
I suppose to echo some of those points and to add to them, the first thing to say is this is not a project for one area of London. And let's be clear, you know, this is a project that is about upgrading the whole existing line, signalling and trains, and extending it out into the southeast through our boroughs and out into Bromley. So that's directly going through Harrow and Brent and Westminster and Lambeth and Southwark and Lewisham and Bromley, directly for all of those bits of London. It'll produce increased benefit in further onward connections out to Heathrow at the end. It'll take strain of other lines in the centre of London, benefiting those around those area. So this is a project for the whole of London, and that's why it's in the London Infrastructure Framework, agreed cross-party by all boroughs and the Mayor as a priority for our city. But then on the more fundamental question of why London, I just want to completely agree with you. The challenge that our country has faced is our economy has stagnated and our productivity has stagnated. And there are various reasons for that, but one of those fundamentally is underinvestment in our infrastructure. And unless we're investing in that infrastructure, and if that's the Bakerloo line in London, it absolutely should be, and if it's in connecting our northern cities, Leeds, Sheffield, Manchester, Birmingham, then it has to be that too. And we are all going to be poorer if we don't do those things in the long term. And perhaps more importantly, our kids are going to be poorer and our grandchildren are going to be poorer. So we have to do these things, and we shouldn't be brought into this false choices. And having had a brief look at Rachel's fiscal rules, I think it's fine.
I'm going to ask one more question of you, Emma, which there's an interesting question here. Can you see any situation where a combined approach to Section 106 negotiations across all of the boroughs that are on Kieran's list there might deliver some significant funding into this project?
I mean, for me, it's not a question of 106, it's a question of Mayoral Sill. And I think, you know, we've just heard why this is more than just about, you know, 2 or 3 boroughs, that this is about the entirety of London. And I think when you look at Sill, one of the most successful uses of it was when it was, you know, the very simple idea that Mayoral Sill pays for one piece of infrastructure. And that, for me, is where the focus should be, that, you know, Crossrail, now that that is completed, once that's paid down, this should be next in the line, because it does do that. That's not to say that there won't be sort of hyper-local issues that would be, you know, suitable for a 106, but I think we would be doing London a disservice if we're not talking about Mayoral Sill.
All right, great, thank you. So the organisers asked whether the panel would be prepared just to stay here for a little short while until we have to finish this session, just for us to just break and have some conversations between us, and they've said they're happy to do that. I just had a message on the slide which has just gone bonkers, by the way, so I'm sorry. Can you please direct delegates to visit the Bakerloo Line Extension Board in the ground floor foyer, just outside the room, where there are booklets and more information that you can take away. So there is a place where you can go and find out more information, other than maybe just visiting the website, outside the room. So I will bring this part of the session to a close and just say thank you very, very much for all coming. And say,
Can I make one comment? Yeah. If you get the opportunity, then please do get that message through to people. 91,000 homes, 142,000 jobs, an upgrade of a line that already exists. That's the thing that we should be saying to people as a clear message about why this is the right project. And watch out for the detailed studies in the autumn.
Brilliant, thanks, Kim. So thank you, Bruce. Thank you very, very much to our very distinguished panel who came here to talk to us today. So can we just say thank you to